They are children first, suicide bombers later, and somewhere in between, strong religious beliefs come into play. Some Pakistani madrasas have become a feeding ground for the next generation of Taliban suicide bombers. So how does it work? How does the recruiting begin? Well, Christiane Amanpour answers those questions this morning as our focus turns to religion and a special Faces of Faith investigation.
You will find my body in little pieces, sings one young boy in this Taliban propaganda video. It's targeting children, celebrating suicide. The Taliban recruits its young martyrs from madrasas on the Pakistan-Afghan border. Shakirullah was one of them.
My dad was teaching me a couple of pages of the Quran. Then he couldn't do it, and he sent me to a madrasa.
His father sent him to a madrasa when he was just 10 years old for a free education. But they didn't realize what else lay in store for him.
I was studying in the madrasa when I finished reciting the Quran. A mullah told me I should go to commit a suicide attack. When I said no, I am not going, he forced me.
When he was 14, Shakirullah was smuggled into Afghanistan through an underground network by people he had never met to a destination he didn't know.
I still don't know what type of suicide attack they had planned for me. I still don't know whether God says it was good or bad.
The Afghan police arrested him before he could complete his mission. And now, sitting in an Afghan jail, he wonders if he'll ever see his family again.
I miss my mom and dad.
I think in some ways we have forfeited the terrain to the Al-Qaedas of the world, who are messaging to those young people in sharp and direct ways.
Eboo Patel, a Muslim who grew up in America feeling like an outsider, understands the path to extremism. He's now a White House advisor on Muslim youth.
It's not a question of them being ideologically attracted to the message of extremism. It's simply a question of that's where the jobs are, that's where the school is, that's where the free lunch program is. I think that one of the central issues of the 21st century is that we will rise or fall on them rising or falling.
And you just saw Eboo Patel profiled in that report. He is a White House advisor on the Muslim religion, also an author, and works with young people from various religious backgrounds to help them serve others. Eboo, we want to thank you for joining us live from Chicago this morning. Let's get to the root of this. Why exactly is the Taliban targeting children to become suicide bombers? Why so young?
The Taliban sees these kids as the embodiment of hate, sees these kids as bombs of destruction. I see these kids as the embodiment of hope. I see these kids as the bridges of cooperation. I think that we need to look at these young people as the future doctors, scientists, and poets. And we have to make sure that we're competing against the Taliban for their hearts and minds. Too often the Taliban school is the only school in town or the only health clinic in town, and parents feel effectively forced to send their kids there. But that doesn't have to be the case.
Well, let me ask you this. Do those parents know when they send their children there to get this education that they're essentially handing them over to the Taliban?
Well, I think very often parents don't understand that, and they certainly don't understand the full extent of that. The Taliban also forces a lot of these kids to be involved. I mean, we're not talking about religion here. We're talking about a sick group of people who are injecting their poison into young children.
What kind of tactics are they using?
Well, they use the tactics of force. They use the tactics of being the only institution in town. The thing here is that there are tactics we can be using. Those of us who believe in a world where people are coming together to build understanding and cooperation, we can build schools, we can build health clinics, we can build religious education programs that taught me what my parents and educators taught me, which is the Quran and Islam as a religion of peace and understanding and cooperation.
But if the Taliban has the only school in a particular area, I mean, do these children really have much of a choice? And what kind of impact does it have on a child when they're essentially sent to strangers and then told, you know what, you're going to go and do this, but you're going to do this in the name of religion?
Betty, the challenge of the 21st century is going to be giving these children a choice. And given a choice, they would want to be doctors. They would want to be scientists. They would want to be poets. They would want to believe in Islam as a religion of peace and cooperation. We cannot forfeit these children to the Talibans of the world. That's exactly the point, is we need to be giving these young people an alternative path so that they can be the embodiment of hope. That's what organizations like my group, the Interfaith Youth Corps, are about. That's what Greg Mortenson's schools are about. We need to invest in those organizations, invest in these kids in a greater way than the Taliban is.
Well, that sounds great, but let me ask you that. In reality, how many of these schools that you talk about, these alternatives, are actually in place for these children?
Betty, we can build more, and we have to build more, and that's what I think that the early part of the 21st century is going to be about. Are we building institutions to help make young people around the world the embodiment of hope, or are we forfeiting them to the forces who seek them to be the embodiment of hate? I think it's that simple, and I think, unfortunately, sometimes the people on the other side are winning just because they're investing more, but that doesn't have to be the case.
All right, Eboo Patel, Executive Director of Interfaith Youth Corps. We really do appreciate your insight today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Betty. Good to be with you.
Sure. It is CNN's Revealing Investigation.